Hello, my dear friends. How are you today? I would like to take the privilege to announce that we have someone great with us. He can be described as a serial technology entrepreneur, but he is different from the founders of the multiple startups that are abundant in Bangalore and Silicon Valley. His spirit of entrepreneurship has flourished when there has been a mix of fun, passion, and crisis. Meet Mr. Arjun Malhotra, who has spawned three firms: the hardware making HCL Computers, initially Microcom, the software services entity TechSpan, and Magic Software. He is the product of one of the prestigious institutions of India, IIT Kharagpur. Mr. Malhotra is also the co-founder of Speak Make, the Society for the Promotion of Indian Classical Music and Culture amongst Youth. Mr. Malhotra was awarded the Albert Einstein Technology Medal in 2001. In 2013, he received an honorary doctorate from Punjab Technical University. He has been awarded with Dr. B.C. Roy Gold Medal and DataQuest Lifetime Achievement Award in 2018. So let's begin our talk with Arjun Malhotra.
Hello.
Hi Harish, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can hear you. So can you hear me?
Yeah, I can see you and I can hear you.
Okay. So, sir, thank you so much. So, thank you so much, sir, for joining. It is really a great matter of pride that, sir, you have joined us today.
Not at all, my pleasure.
Sir, should I begin with the interview?
Sure, if you're ready, I'm ready.
Okay, sir, great. Sir, I think it will be little injustice if we have you and didn't ask about the idea and inspiration behind the building of SCL Technologies.
So, when we started it wasn't called HCL Technologies, it was called HCL, or it was called Hindustan Computers Limited. The acronym became HCL. Of us used to work in a company called DCM. You probably heard of them. They're very big, used to be very big. Basically, cloth and vanaspati and chemicals and rayon tire cord. Very conglomerate in a way. So I joined them as a senior management trainee straight out of IIT Kharagpur in 1970. And after my 1-year training, they wanted to get into electronics. And so I was one of the few electronics engineers in the company. And so I was pulled into this new division or department, it was called then, called DCM Data Products. And we basically started off with electronic calculators. And that expanded, it became programmable calculators, and then it went into, we developed our own computer using bit slice technology and microprocessors. Microprocessors were just coming out, and India was a socialist country in those days. So there was an act called the Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act, which didn't allow big companies to get into new areas. And DCM was the fourth largest private sector company by revenue, at least, in the country at that time. And so they were advised by their lawyers and whoever they consulted that they shouldn't get into a new field like computers, because that would get them, the government would not like it and they would get fined and all that stuff. Now we felt, I was 24, 25 years old, and we felt that the jump from programmable calculators to computers was a logical jump, and it didn't mean you were making something extra. But DCM decided not to get into computers. And so 6 of us left and decided to start a company because we felt that microprocessors were going to change the world at that time. And I guess that has come out true. And so we decided to start our own computer company. We have licenses were restricted to state and public sector organizations. So we signed a joint sector agreement with the UP Electronics Corporation. And that's how Hindustan Computers Limited was established. That's how it started. No business plan. We didn't have any money. We pooled our resources together. We started the office in my grandmother's Bursati here in Golf Links where I lived. And that's how the company started.
Oh, great. Sir, I have listened or I have read about you that you were given a title of serial technology entrepreneur by Business Today.
Yeah,
Uh,
so
Sir,
yeah, go ahead.
you have also built two other companies, Tech Spam and Magic Software. Sir, we are eagerly awaiting to listen about that also.
So, I was in HCL for 23 years. I decided, so I got to give a little background. When I started HCL, I was already married and I had a kid. My daughter was born. And, you know, everyone thought in those days security was important. I come from a family where people have been scientists, teachers. My dad was in the army. My mother was a teaching medical doctor. And so no one had ever started a business before. I mean, the word entrepreneurship, we didn't know, it didn't exist in those days. You were a businessman or you worked in a company or in the government. So when I started, I promised myself that I am doing this because I want the freedom to do what I want to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do at the age of 25, but I figured at some stage in my life I'll decide I want to do something. I wanted the economic freedom that I have enough money to be able to do what I wanted. That was my motivation. So after 20 plus years in HCL, I was turning 50. The internet was coming out, and I wanted to fool around on the internet, at the edge of the internet, with the new technologies and stuff. HCL and by that time HCL had become a public company, and and correctly so, in its logic, decided that they wanted to wait to see which way the trends would go, and then they would invest behind it and try and take a leadership position. To me, that was the right thing for the company, but not exciting for me. And so I decided to leave and try and do something around the internet. What happened was I was working from home. And what happens is when you come home after all those years, you suddenly start looking at things and saying, this is not right, that is not right, or whatever. So my wife sat me down one day, I think within a week or so of my starting this, and she told me, I think she said, I married you for good or bad. We've been married for 27 years, but I didn't marry you for lunch. So please go out and work. This house has run without you, quite well. So I then took a little room in a business center and started working from there. And then I met some other people who had left HCL who were also there. And we all got talking. And that's basically how the idea of starting another company. Basically, by this time I was in the US and we had started HCL America, which has now become HCL Technologies. And we noticed that because we were an Indian company, we always had to discount compared to an American company. And so, my logic was when you buy from General Motors, because the body is made in Mexico, you don't ask for a discount. But yet, when you said I wanted to do software development in India, you always had the first thing was give me a better price. And so we thought that if we moved from just doing software to consulting, we'd be able to position ourselves better. So we started a company called TechSpan where we wanted to focus on consulting. Again, there was a history. What really happened was right after we started the bubble where everyone wanted to go internet, they thought brick and mortar would die. So we switched immediately to getting to do e-commerce basically. And we grew really well. And then the bubble burst. And so you had to find a way to survive out of that. And while we were doing that, we got a chance to merge with a company called Headstrong, which was the erstwhile James Martin and Company. And James Martin and Company had a joint venture with HCL, and I was the chairman of that joint venture. And they were basically a consulting company. So when we merged with them, we took their name, we became Headstrong, because that was the name that was known in the market for consulting. And we became a consulting-oriented IT services company. And basically we decided that, the other thing we decided was that we wanted to specialize. We said we can't be everything for everyone at our size. We were about 60 million odd at that time. You're competing with people who are 400, 500 million with TCS, with Infosys. And if I went and said I can do everything better than them, no one is going to believe it. Because obviously they have more people, they've done more jobs, they've got more people in QA, they've got more people in whichever field I was going to do. So we decided to focus on the capital markets, investment banks, and become specialized in that. And so it was called domain expertise. So that's what we developed. And so when we talk to a customer, he didn't give us a spec and say, write the program. We discussed the business and said, what do you want to do? How do you want to do it? And once we came to a conclusion on how the business had to be done, then we wrote the IT program to support that business. So we were what we call technology agnostic. It didn't matter to me whether you want the program written in C, C#, C++, or whatever language. I would be able to do it. As long as I understood the business and we discussed it, and I became kind of a, how should I put it? We discussed the business rather than just the specification of the idea. And that is what Headstrong did. That's what made us unique. That is why Genpact bought us in 2010, I think it was, when they decided they wanted to have a bigger footprint in the IT services and they wanted to be in specialized areas. They paid us a pretty fancy multiplier for what we had at that time. And I would have loved to continue with the company and grow it, but all my other co-founders were first-time entrepreneurs. And so I thought it was only fair that they also get some some assets, some money, make some money when we sell the company, which is what we did. We also did one nice thing in TechSpan and Headstrong, is we gave options to everyone. So everyone made money when we sold the company. So for example, we had 50 US dollar millionaires and over 1,000 people in India who made more than 10 lakhs. So, and that was real satisfaction. So then I decided I might as well retire. I'd spent, enough time in the business. But then a lot of startups had come to me and they wanted advice on what to do and stuff like that. So as I looked at it, and I said, I've got to also decide I can't do everything for everyone, and I don't want to be just a general management consultant kind of thing. So I decided to focus on two areas, on healthcare and on education. And I felt both these areas were where technology can make a big difference, especially in India. So Magic is part of that healthcare initiative. So I spent time in Magic because Magic works on digital content and Magic is the education initiative. Magic works on digital content and, works with publishers. Right now, most of our business is overseas, and India is slowly waking up and catching up. But we expect the volumes to come in India in the next 4 or 5 years, once, and this COVID problem might accelerate it because more and more kids have to work from home and study from home. So that's what we do at Magic. We also have a great specialization there on what we call accessibility. So if you look at a country like the US, they claim some 20 to 25% of the kids have some kind of learning disability, whether it's autism, whether it's ADHD, or whatever, whether it's visually disabled or hearing disabled, they have some kind of learning disability. And to make digital content accessible to them, there are some rules and regulations that have been put out, but you have to adapt your digital content to be accessible. And all the large publishers like Pearson and HMH and Wiley and everyone wants to adapt. Obviously, they want to sell in that market. And so we are sort of experts in that area. We work with them to review their content. We tell them what the gaps are. And then if they want, we help them fulfill those gaps. So that's what we're doing in education. On healthcare, we're doing some very interesting things. I work with a number of companies. The company I'll mention where I'm on the board again is a company called Evolco. We do a number of things there. Right now we are doing OPDs, online OPDs for a whole lot of government, private hospitals and private clinics. We do triaging, right? We do telemedicine, and we do a whole, we do monitoring, home monitoring. So we do a whole lot of things for people. We've already got something like 8-9 million patients on our system, and they're growing at a fairly fast rate. So it's give me a lot of satisfaction because we work with rural folks. It's lovely to see them, so if you're in a village far away from a hospital, you don't have the ability to talk to a doctor. So we allow them to do that through our telemedicine solution. It's specific for India because we customize it with the assumption that doctor time is a limitation. Unlike overseas where the doctor is sitting behind the terminal, we don't assume that. We assume that the system has to be intelligent enough to ask all the questions it needs to ask and then connect you to a doctor. So it's done asynchronously first, then connected to a doctor. So the doctor spends the papers published, AIIMS Patna had done this, and they had published a paper out of the 80,000 telemedicine consultations that they did. They estimated they saved 50,000 visits to the hospital, which means that 50,000 people, they were able to do preventive work rather than curative work, which saves the hospital a lot of time. But for the poor people in the village, they estimated each visit would have cost that person 2,000 rupees because they would have come to Patna with an attendant or with someone to accompany them, spent a night in Patna and then gone back to the village. And so they estimated it as 2,000 rupees. And when I multiply 2,000 by 50,000, it's 10 crores. And when you think you saved poor people 10 crores, that's a lot of money. And that was only a sample of some 40 or 30 telemedicine locations. We are looking at putting 1,100 of them in Bihar. Now Bihar is 2,000. So the amount of money you'll be able to save poor people and the load on the hospital you'll be able to get down is quite substantial. So I'm really excited about the fact that we are successfully leveraging technology right now with a great impact in healthcare in India and hopefully over time in education.
Great to listen.
So that's
sir.
what keeps me busy.
It is really, you are doing such a great thing. Sir, I want to share one thing with you. When I was in my school days, our school keep organizing traditional dance. Sometimes it is traditional song. It is not only keep us for the enjoyment. Also, we learn many things. Suppose that because our school in East UP, so by this we got learn about the songs and the dance tradition of Odisha and different parts of the country. So I see there is a one word or one poster every time they place, which is of Speak Make. So that time I am not much aware, but I am totally sure that whenever I met the person who is doing really great for all of us, I will really say thank you to that person. Sir, today I got to know, sir, that you are the founder of that Speak Make. So sir, please tell us about that.
So, I've got to admit that while I take the credit for being one of the co-founders of Speak Make, it was really founded by 4 people. And the driving force behind it is Dr. Kiran Seth, who's a professor emeritus now at IIT Delhi. Kiran Seth is a good friend. He's a batchmate from IIT Kharagpur. We did our engineering together. He did mechanical, I did electronics. He had come to actually I was staying with my mother at that time. She was a doctor at Maulana Azad Medical College. And we were sitting one winter afternoon out in the lawn in front of the house having beer because he had another friend of his who studied with him at Columbia, did an MBA, Mahendra Mallu, who unfortunately passed away. He was the president of Haryana Breweries. So he got some Rosy Pelican beer. You may have heard of it. I don't know if it's still available. And the 4th person there was another gentleman who I believe has also passed away. Sitting there and talking and having beer. And, one of the debate topics in my time when I was in college was that Indian culture is being lost to Western pop culture. And for some reason, that subject came up for discussion. And we all felt that we are missing out on our own culture, rich culture in music and arts and various other things. And that, why don't we do something about it? So we said, let's not just talk about it. Let's say what we can do. So we listed down a whole charter of what can be done. And we couldn't think of a name. And so we decided that the charter of the organization or the society or whatever would be the name. That's why Speak Make stands for Society for the Promotion of Indian Classical Music and Culture Amongst Youth. And so if you take that and take the alphabets, it becomes Speak Make. That's how it started. And so initially, I'll give you another story about Speak Make. So initially, Kiran, who was running it, was having difficulty trying to get audiences and trying to advertise and tell people something is going on. So he talked to me and said if I could help. in those days, HCL had a big advertising budget. Every Monday morning, once a week, I think the first Monday of every month, we would take a full page ad out in every newspaper in the country. I mean, Deccan Herald, Deccan Chronicle, you name it. The big ones, of course. Times of India, Indian Express, Hindustan Times, Economic Times, Financial Express. We took a full page ad out. And so I had a pretty big advertising budget. So what I did was I talked to the advertising agency and said, you make a lot of commission. Give me a little piece of it so that I can take a 1 column centimeter ad and take it out on page 3 of Hindustan Times and Times of India in Delhi, if we were doing a function in Delhi, for example. And so we were doing that for Speak McKay. And we'd have a little thing at the bottom saying, sponsored by Hindustan Computers Limited. In the meanwhile, we had actually started doing software exports. It was called SED, Software Export Division. We were selling hardware and we were selling computers in Singapore, but we weren't just selling hardware, we were selling solutions. And the way it worked was you got the requirements from the customer in Singapore. You sent them to our SED, Software Export Division in Madras, now Chennai. And we did the code for you, put it on a floppy and sent it back. And we chose Madras because there were at least 3 Singapore Airlines flights every week between Madras and Singapore. And it was closer to Singapore, so, it made it easier. The problem was software was not considered an industry. It was considered the trade. So the Software Export Division, I remember it was at 4 Haddowes Road in Madras, came under the Shops and Establishment Act. It didn't come under the Companies Act. Now, under the Shops and Establishment Act, you have to maintain lots of registers and stuff like that. It was a real mess. And as a company, we weren't used to it. We weren't shopkeepers. We were really a company. And so we petitioned the Tamil Nadu government to make software an industry. And, Shiv Nada, who was our chairman at HCL, because he's from Tamil Nadu and he had connections with the Kamraj Nadar, the political families there, he had taken the lead on it. And it took a fairly long time, 5 or 6 months. And one day he comes to me in office in HCL in Delhi, and he says, "What is this Speak McKay?" And I thought, oh, maybe chori pakdi gayi, as they say, na? So I then explained to him what we are doing and asked him, why are you asking? So he said, we finally got clearance for software as an industry. How did that happen? He said, because these people in Tamil Nadu, the IAS and the politicians, saw these ads for Speak McKay, and they saw they were sponsored by Hindustan Computers Limited. And they said, we believe if you can do that, the company has a soul, so we'll take your word for it. And that's how software became an industry. So, when you look at software today and what it has done to this country, it's some 5, 7, 8, 10% of our GDP, right? That's how it started as an industry, basically, many, many years ago.
Wonderful. Sir, as now we have seen that recently pandemic is going on and we don't know how long will it carry on. Sir, as you are into this field and you have gained much experience, so I find you suitable person to ask this question. Sir, what do you think, what is the effect of COVID-19 on corporate world?
So, it's very difficult to predict what will happen. I mean, right now I'll be guessing, and my guess is as good as anyone's, including yours. But the bottom line is there is going to be what people call a new normal. I don't think we'll go back to exactly the way we were. I think one is the fear factor in people, right? As you can see, we are doing social distancing, we are doing, masks, we are doing all those protective things that we need to do. So every industry is going to be impacted differently. Look at what's going to happen in education. A lot more online classes will happen, right? Universities that have only campuses today are likely to go online also, so they will expand their reach and education and everything. The tourism industry, the hospitality industry is going to be hit fairly hard, and then the airline and the transportation industry will be hit. So different industries, restaurants are going to be hit, for example. Different industries are going to see things differently. A lot more money is going to go into preventive healthcare, into public health systems, based on this. So I think you're going to see a change in what is going to happen. it's anyone's guess how deep it's going to be. I think you've seen how pollution has come under control with everyone staying home, cars being off the road, factories being closed. I am not sure people will let the old pollution levels come back. I'm pretty sure that they will, start doing things or forcing people to do things where they get better air to breathe. Right. I also think that if you look at what's happening in the IT services companies, that Google and Facebook have said you can work from home till the end of the year. Twitter has said you can work from home forever. Right. TCS has said we expect only 25% of our people to come back to office. The rest can work from home. So you're going to see real estate getting impacted. Because what are we going to do with all that real estate that all these IT services companies have? They don't need that much real estate anymore. So I think that's the important thing. So you are going to see a lot of change. I think people are going to change, companies are going to change, businesses are going to change. I think everyone is going to see that change. And I strongly believe in entrepreneurs. I think they are the ones who will lead the change. They are the ones who will come up and do things differently. They'll take advantage of the crisis. Obviously, the crisis, you have to take advantage of crisis, as I think Churchill said at some stage. But I think entrepreneurs are going to find ways to get into these new businesses in a very different way. You're forcing the traditional companies to change, very much like happened with online book sales that Amazon did, that online booking for hotels and airlines did. A lot of those changes came in because the internet changed the way business was being done. I think COVID is also going to change the way business is being done. And so you're going to see a lot of those changes coming. And that should be fun to see, I mean.
Sir, we have visited...
Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, we have visited many online portals and we have called many people, and which is one of the most common question which is evolving right now is, will this pandemic is going to affect the job of people, those who are involved into this?
Yes, definitely. You already see restaurants and hotels. I mean, restaurants definitely are going to need fewer people. They're going to need different kinds of people. Jobs will shift. They'll need more people for delivery, less people for serving people on the tables. Ultimately, I think they'll employ more people, right? Because the waiters might get impacted. You might have to reduce them by half or 1/4. But the cooks there'll be more cooks and they will have more delivery if they can do a successful job of transitioning to delivery at home from delivery in the restaurant, right? So you're going to see that happen. You're going to see a whole lot of other things happen. In fact, just look at education. Take your university, for example. If online education at higher education, university level, becomes the norm, then I have a thought, and I just leave this thought with you. Why would someone come to a lovely technical university or anywhere? Why wouldn't they go to the IITs? Because IITs can take 1 million, 2 million, 3 million people online. There's no limitation with who you can go online, right? And so why would people want to go to a smaller university or a lesser known university and not go to the leading universities, right? So just think about it. Is that going to happen? Is that likely scenario as we go forward? Also, when you look at people in the US, if this is the way it's going to go, a lot of online content has to be developed. Why would I pay expensive people in the US to develop it? I've got as competent people in India who can do it. So why would I not get the content developed here for higher education? Why would that not be a new business that would come up? So just think, I'm only giving some ideas. I don't know if they'll work or if this is the way the world will go. But everything is going to change in some way or the other. And whoever takes advantage of it and gets in there first and does the right thing or in the right segment or in the right area is going to be a successful entrepreneur.
Sir, we have received most common question from the student side, that is, will this pandemic is going to affect the placements also of those who are in their final years or in third year?
I'm not sure. Yes, internships will be tougher to come by, and so will, placements. Yes, I think people need people. Let me put it that way. They might push them out a little. They might want them to get trained a little more, but ultimately they will get recruited. We've had this problem earlier also, right? So it's not that this is the first time something like this is happening. Some industries will push people out a little. Some will say, instead of joining in July, join me in October, join me in December, whatever. Now it's up to the students, I think. Smarter students will upgrade themselves. If I was a kid today and my company said, I'll join me 3 months later, I tell them, why don't you do my orientation online? So that when I join, I become productive a lot quicker than my coming and getting an orientation while I'm there. In a way, I do it because then it commits the company to taking me in, right? And I can make that read. And if they don't commit, then I'll start looking for other jobs because there are other industries and other companies who want me, right? So I think it'll happen. I think there may be delays. I think there'll be frustrations, stuff like that. But, I don't see it as a problem. I think it'll happen. And even if it gets delayed substantially, why don't you look at doing a master's program if you're an undergraduate? And if you're a master's, why don't you think of doing a PhD? And if you're a PhD, why don't you do some postdoctoral research? So you have to make sure you run your own life. Don't let the world run your life. You decide what you want to do based on the inputs that you get. So I think it'll happen. I think you'll see some delays, but I don't think you need to get panicky about it.
All right, sir. Sir, what can be the learning for all of us from this pandemic?
I think the learning is, don't take anything for granted. The learning is very simple. This came up, the pandemic came up, it impacted the whole world. Something else will come up tomorrow. It may not have the same level of impact. It might have an impact just in a local area where you are. Might have an impact only in your industry where you're working. But yes, it is good. So I would say what I wanted to tell people is, or youngsters who are in college, is try and get a wider edge. Just don't focus on what you're being taught. Try and go to the library if you have a library. Read up around other things. Try and get some general knowledge. Try and areas where you're interested, try and go into a lot more depth, much more than what they teach you. You should be able to teach the teacher in some of those areas. Areas where you're not too interested, but you have to, you've got a mug. So you mug, everyone has to mug certain things that they have to, give out during exams. Yes, but try and understand the fundas. Get your fundas clear in this. Try and understand the basics. Talk to your friends, discuss it, argue it with them. I found that's one good way of clearing up my fundas, because they understood it differently, I understood it differently. If we try and explain to each other, we did come up with some kind of a better understanding. So I think that's what it is. Then try and be yourself. I think everyone is an individual. Everyone is the best himself. Try and be yourself. Try and develop yourself. Try and make yourself a better person. I think that's about the only advice I think I'd like to give.
It's really a great message from your side to all the upcoming engineers and those who are already in the corporate world. Sir, as we have seen, you are already into this entrepreneurship, or we can say corporate world, from many years. Sir, some people enter into this world or during their college times and try to involve themselves into it. So, sir, how do you look at it?
It's up to you. Times have changed. In my time, I would have said, work for a little while, understand the business before you get into it. Right. But in a fast changing environment like we have today, a lot of times you can get into it without having a great understanding of the business unit. You want to take a chance, you take that chance. And today, unlike earlier, how should I put it? The need for security is not that great. The negative part of failure is not that big. Failure is not seen as an end all for anyone. Right? It's quite different from the time we started 50 plus years ago. But I think what I would tell people is ultimately try and get a degree, even if you start before you finish your degree. Try and finish your degree, even if it's through correspondence. because ultimately it's good to show that you have some level of education. Tomorrow things change, you want to go in and do something else. Your degree helps you get credibility with whoever you're talking to. So I would say that ideally, I would say, the other thing I tell people is, if you're starting a company or try and recruit people who are smarter than you. And I tell people that there are people smarter than you out there. If you look for them, they are there. Don't recruit people who will only say yes to what you say, because then you're doomed. You might as well get clerical people, you'll never really grow anywhere. You've got to get people who are smarter than you. You've got to listen to them, because a lot of times when you're starting off, you make lots of mistakes. But the trick is to be able to correct yourself quickly and get onto the right path. And so I think that's probably the most important message I give people. And work in a team. Very rarely do people do things individually. And try and, how shall I put it, try and identify a team that will work with you through good and bad. And my other advice to people who work in teams is try and make sure that if they're married, their spouses get along with each other. That's very important, because after all, you have to go home and live with your spouse, and you don't want her cribbing about someone else all the time. Then over a period of time, it sort of impacts you also. But if they get along, then it's much easier. You never get into, and of course, run a professional company. What you don't want to hear your wife say is कि उसके wife ने वो diamond ring कहाँ से लिया है, वो diamond earrings कहाँ से लिए है. I mean, you don't want to listen to that, because all of you are in the same if you're entrepreneurs, startups, you're all taking it from the same pot. And so it's, and if you have a professional company done, audited right and transparent, none of this stuff is going to happen. And those are my learnings from HCL. We kept it completely transparent. We kept, there was no quote unquote black money, as they call it. And people worked for us because they felt they were working for a professional company. Which is one reason why, if you look at the Indian IT industry today, I would say there are at least 20 CEOs who work with us in HCL and are doing quite well, some large, some medium-sized companies. And they're doing really well, which is, which makes me, and I guess all of us, really proud that we were able to create these people who are doing so well.
All right, sir. Sir, you are, as we have seen, you are already from one of the prestigious college of India, IIT Kharagpur. Sir, what would you recommend to the students, those who are still in their colleges? They must learn these type of skills in their college days to make themselves corporate ready.
No, I think what you've got to do is make sure, you have confidence. And you get confidence if you know your subject. And you know not just your subject, you know what you're talking about. I would recommend to people play some kind of sport, some kind of team sport, if you can. I mean, individual sports are very good, things like tennis and stuff, because when you later on in life, that's the best way to keep fit. Swimming, tennis, stuff like that. But try and play some team sports when you're in college. That, what it does is it tells you how to work in a team, how to win and lose with the team, how to support your team when someone is up, happy, unhappy, etc., etc. I think those are the things, if you can learn that, get yourself to be a more rounded person when you come on. Not just know your subject, know a little bit about Indian philosophy, know a little bit about literature, other things that know, get your knowledge. That makes the person a much more effective to the corporate world than being focused on work.
Hello.
Okay.
Yes. Sir, one last question from my side. That is, sir, what would you like to give the message to upcoming entrepreneurs?
No, just that, hey, the whole world depends on you. I think that's the first message I'll give. Second is, try and work with people who are smarter than you. Try and build a team. And third is, just do what you have to do. Keep it transparent. Just remember, the world will keep going no matter what you're doing, but passion, I think, is the most important thing for entrepreneurs. You want to do, and you're successful, at least you're happy when you're doing it. And that is the most important thing for most people in life. A lot of people go through life being unhappy about what they're doing. Real tragedy. But if you're an entrepreneur and you have a passion for what you're doing, that makes you happy. I definitely tell entrepreneurs, I'll give a analogy here. Money is like girls. If you run after them, they'll run away from you. Okay. So the money will come if you're successful. But do what you've got a passion for. And obviously you'll be happy doing it. And if you're successful, you'll probably make some money. But at least you'll be happy even if you don't make that much money. So I think that's the message I'd like to give. Okay.
It was a wonderful message, and also it was a wonderful interaction, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. It is really a great matter of pleasure that you have joined us, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Harsh. Look forward
Thank you
to
so much,
meeting sometime in person. Okay?
Yeah, sure,
Okay.
sir.
Take care.
Sure.
Okay. All
Thank
the
you, sir.
best.